she would be prepared to speak if granted clemency by President Donald Trump, claiming she could offer the unfiltered truth. The deposition comes as Congress reviews millions of Justice Department documents related to Epstein. Lawmakers say some high-profile names remain redacted, even as officials maintain no new prosecutions are expected. Let's listen in to Maxwell and her lawyer.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Ms. Maxwell, did you at any time play any role in Jeffrey Epstein's activities involving the recruitment, grooming, or trafficking of young women or girls?
I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence.
If this committee and the American public truly want to hear the unfiltered truth about what happened, there is a straightforward path. Ms. Maxwell is prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump. Only she can provide a complete account, and some may not like what they hear, but the truth matters. For example, both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Ms. Maxwell alone can explain why, and the public is entitled to hear that explanation. Thank you.
Ghislaine Maxwell there, accomplice and boyfriend of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Matthew Vadum joins us in this discussion. He's an American journalist. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Her lawyer there claiming that Maxwell can deliver the unfiltered truth, but only if clemency is on the table for her. Does that undermine the credibility of what she might say?
Not necessarily. Often witnesses give testimony in exchange for immunity from prosecution or in exchange for, leniency during their trials. So I don't think it necessarily undermines her credibility. The real question is whether President Trump would actually grant it and clemency, and that seems to me highly unlikely. The public on the Epstein files is baying for blood, and Ghislaine Maxwell is the only person who is behind bars, and yet there are all sorts of fantastic theories that there are many more people in elite society who are involved, and no one has been charged and no one has been put behind bars. The vaunted client list of Epstein has never, to the best of my knowledge, been released. And this was a major campaign promise of President Trump in the 2024 campaign, was for the government to be transparent about the Epstein files. The Epstein files, more than 3 million documents have now been released, but a lot of those documents have been heavily redacted. And you have congressmen like Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, and Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, saying that they know of at least 6 people whose names were redacted, whose names should not have been redacted from the files as released. And they didn't name them, probably because they could be sued by stating their names in public, but they could easily go to the floor of the House of Representatives and state their names, state the alleged individuals' names, and be immune from lawsuits under their under the Constitution, which allows them to say things on the floor of the House of Representatives and not be sued over them. So I think that President Trump would pay a very heavy political price if he were to, not charge anyone new, as a result of the Epstein scandal, and to suddenly turn around and give some sort of a deal to Ghislaine Maxwell, that would be a very tough sell politically. It would make Donald Trump look very bad, and I don't think he's suicidal. I don't think he would do it. Maybe they could reach some sort of a minor deal, but she's not going to get out of prison for cooperating.
Matthew, why isn't Donald Trump ruling out issuing Ghislaine Maxwell a presidential pardon? If he did, what will that do to his credibility going into those midterms in November, especially in this current climate?
Politically, it would probably be very helpful for him to rule out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. As I said a moment ago, maybe some sort of a minor clemency could be granted, or her sentence reduced or something like that. But even that is still going to be very unpopular with President Trump's own political base, which is on the issue of the Epstein files and Epstein-related prosecutions, is fairly angry with Donald Trump right now. So he'd be putting himself in a perilous situation were he to play ball with Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers on this point.
And do you think we could see further prosecutions when it comes to these files? As you've said, Ghislaine Maxwell is the only one that remains incarcerated currently. And of course, also, those files are not an indication of guilt by any of the individuals mentioned. But do you think we have seen the end of this as Donald Trump wants it to be?
No, we haven't seen the end of it, because in the public's mind, there are still many unanswered questions, and until the public starts to be given some more definitive answers, I think people are still going to be exercised and upset about the Epstein situation. So yeah, I don't think the problem is going to go away for Trump anytime soon.
Matthew, how's the American media covering this? Of course, we all know about the way that news is broadcast in the US. You have your Fox News, and on the other side you have your CNN. What's both of the sides looking at when it comes to this case?
I think both sides. You mean both left-wing and right-wing?
Indeed.
Media outlets. I think both are pressing for something more to be done. They are not satisfied that enough has been done to expose the wrongdoing of any co-conspirators Jeffrey Epstein may have had. So the pressure from the media, I have no doubt, is going to continue.
Indeed. Matthew, do stay with us as we turn over to our next story and we head to the Caribbean. And the US Southern Command has confirmed a military strike on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 2 individuals. According to a statement released, the vessel was involved in narcotics trafficking along known routes and operated by designated terrorist organizations. The strike resulted in the deaths of 2 suspected narco-terrorists. Following the engagement, the US Southern Command activated a search and rescue operation through the US Coast Guard for the survivor. The strike is part of the ongoing Operation Southern Spear, targeting narco-trafficking in the region. We turn once again to the United States, and President Trump has opposed Israel's move to annex parts of the occupied West Bank, stating that a stable West Bank is crucial for Israel's security and peace in the region. This follows new measures announced by Israeli ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Israel Katz, which extend Israeli control over the Palestinian territory and make it easier for Israelis to acquire land for new settlements. In response, 8 Muslim-majority countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, have condemned Israel's actions, calling them an attempt to impose unlawful Israeli sovereignty. The United Nations and Spain have also expressed concern, with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warning that these actions threaten the two-state solution. The measures include transferring authority over building authority in Hebron from the Palestinian Authority to Israel, and also tightening control over key religious sites like Rachel's tomb and the Cave of the Patriarchs. Additionally, Israel plans to expand enforcement of environmental and archaeological laws in areas of the West Bank, potentially leading to further demolitions. Matthew Verdum joins us once again. What does Donald Trump's opposition to Israel annexing the West Bank say about his current stance on it? While, of course, Israel their current government continues to approve actions that Bezalel Smotrich speaks of.
Right. I think that President Donald Trump's position is that the West Bank cannot be annexed by Israel. I think it might be a good move for Israel in terms of its national security, but it would be wildly unpopular in the Arab world. And I think President Trump's opposition to Israeli annexation of the West Bank reflects that. It would create a firestorm of opposition throughout the Arab world, and would turn a lot of countries that have been either friendly towards Israel or at least not hostile to Israel to suddenly become hostile. The West Bank is very important to Arabs, and they don't want it to come under they don't want it to be dominated by Israel, and it would drive them into a frenzy of anger if Israel were to take it over. And that is why the United States, particularly President Trump, has resisted Israel on this point. President Trump is probably the greatest friend in the White House that Israel has ever had, but that doesn't mean that he kowtows to Israel, that he does everything it doesn't mean that he allows Israel to do everything that it wants to do. He draws a line on the issue of the West Bank, and that is, as he sees it, important for regional stability and for preventing explosions of Arab anger at Israel and the United States.
And Donald Trump has been seen as found a new relationship with those Gulf states in particular, your Qatars, your Saudi Arabias. What credibility does this two-state solution still have when international actors warn it is being undermined, yet no enforcement mechanisms follow it?
I don't think there ever will be two states. Some countries have recognized Palestine, such as the United Kingdom and so on, and some European countries, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. The Palestinians have been offered over the last 50 years, Yasser Arafat and others have turned down actual solid offers from Israel to create a second state, to create a Palestinian state, and it has never come to fruition because Palestinians, I tend to agree with the Israeli position on this, that Palestinians really don't want a second state. They just want to kill, like Hamas, they just want to keep attacking Israelis. And so, I think that there's always been a certain sort of phoniness, artificiality in this discussion of a two-state solution. I don't think it's a real thing. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but it's constantly held up by politicians as this ideal that they're striving for. I think that the best that can be done, at least for the foreseeable future, is to pursue peace between the Palestinians and Israel. And they'll say that they're pursuing a two-state solution, and even the United States may say that it's pursuing a two-state solution, but it's there's something about it that's just very, very phony.
Okay, Matthew Vadum, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We turn now to South Asia, and Bangladesh's leading prime ministerial contender, Tariq Rahman, has said that his Bangladesh Nationalist Party would not form a unity government if they come to power after the national election scheduled on February the 12th. Rahman added that the BNP is confident it can win enough seats to govern on its own. Let's listen in to what Tariq Rahman had to say.
If we are in the government, we need to provide jobs for the young people. We need to provide, bring businesses in the country so that jobs can be created, people can have a better life. We need to provide medical service for our people. We need to rebuild the education system for our people. There are many challenges. And to fight these challenges, of course, in this world, a single country cannot fight it. They need friends, of course, we need friends.
Joining us on this now is Colonel Sanjeet Sirohi, an international relations and defence expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us. The region is gearing up for those elections on February the 12th. Some big statements coming there from Rahman. In a country as politically divided as Bangladesh, is rejecting a unity government, a sign of confidence for the Nationalist Party?
Good morning, Thomas, and thank you very much for having me on your district channel and discussing something very, very latest and important. Now, as you have mentioned, that Tariq Rahman, who is now the chairman of the Bangladesh National Party, although the Bangladesh National Party, that is the BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, have been fighting elections together for so many years, as long as Awami League was the main party. But now, since Awami League has been banned and Sheikh Hasina has taken asylum in India, so now both these parties are fighting against each other. And their Jamaat-e-Islami chairman, Shafiqur Rahman, he wants to come into the government whenever the government is formed. But Tariq Rahman has said no, because he says that since we are fighting against each other in the elections, there is no question of forming the government together. So I think it shows that Tariq Rahman is very, very confident about his party, and he has claimed that they are going to win more than 2/3 majority in the House. So if that be the case, I think that is the right option for Mr. Tariq Rahman to go solo for forming the government. Thomas.
And given Bangladesh's history of disputed elections, how credible is the BNP's claim that it can secure a clear solo mandate, especially, of course, with the Awami League being banned, as you've already mentioned?
Look, earlier, if you see, from 2001 to 2006, BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, they formed the government together when BNP leader became the prime minister. But now things have changed. Now the Jamaat-e-Islami has formed a distinct group with 11 parties together, and these 11 parties also include the National Citizen Party, which was instrumental in overthrowing Sheikh Hasina in 2024. So I think that both these parties are now fighting elections and both are trying to form the government. So if BNP comes, then it will be better for the country. But if Jamaat-e-Islami come, because although Jamaat-e-Islami does not have that much of support base, but now with the latest change and Awami League out of the election fray, so I think Jamaati will also get some good seats. And after that, let's see what happens, because if there is one party, that the BNP, comes into majority, then I think the Jamaati have to go into the opposition. But once Jamaati goes into opposition, there will be a lot of problems in Bangladesh because all the problems which have been created lately are by the Jamaati Islami and the National Citizen Party, which if they come into opposition, then they are going to create more problems for the BNP. Thomas.
Do stay with us, Colonel Sarohi, as we turn on to our next story. We have further updates coming out of Bangladesh and the Gen Z voters there, many of whom are casting ballots for the first time, are approaching next month's national election with a mix of hope, skepticism and demands for change. This comes as when millions of first-time voters, the Gen Z in the South Asian nation in 2024, led an uprising that uprooted an iron-fisted autocracy of nearly 16 years and forced the ex-Prime Minister to flee into neighbouring India after shedding a bloodbath on the streets. Let's listen in to what some of first-time voters had to say.
We saw in the previous regime or in the previous time that the people of Bangladesh were treated politically, that which political bloc they belong to. But I want to see a change in this perspective, that the people of this country will not be treated politically for their political, the political bloc or political party affiliation. But I hope that the people of this land will be treated as a citizen. They will be given the citizen rights, the basic rights. They will be treated only as citizens, not with their political affiliation.
The political parties are specifically focusing on youth because they know a large chunk of people haven't voted for the past couple of years in elections. So all are trying to grab this particular vote bank. I personally think they are not concerned about what we think, rather they are concerned about whom we vote for. So that's what they are concerned about. And yes, I do not think the youths are much attracted or fascinated by any of the parties' activities right now, although they have all the political parties have proposed many reforms and many ideas. We all appreciate that, but we want to see groundwork.
We turn now to Europe's defining crisis, and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has praised the resilience of emergency responders and railway workers as they continue to maintain critical infrastructure despite daily Russian attacks. In his regular video address, Zelensky highlighted the tireless efforts of Ukraine's state emergency service in restoring energy facilities and extinguishing fires. He also acknowledged the continued operation of Ukraine's railways despite ongoing strikes targeting logistics and railway-related facilities. Zelensky called for intensified efforts in February to strengthen Ukraine's position in the war, including improved access to Starlink systems and reliable delivery of military equipment. Let's listen in to what the Ukrainian president had to say.
Дякую за реальну ефективність рятувальникам ДСНС України, які щодня працюють на об'єктах енергетики, на гасінні пожеж. Щодня допомагають людям та громадам пройти цей складний час. Результати кожного, хто задіяний зараз в ліквідації наслідків ударів, у відновленні – це робота на всю Україну, на силу нашої держави, на здатність українців вистояти і цією зимою. Та загалом хочу теж відзначити Укрзалізницю, усіх фахівців Укрзалізниці. Надзвичайно складно. Зараз фактично щодня російські удари по нашій логістиці, по об'єктах, які працюють на залізницю, по рухомому складу. На багатьох напрямках небезпечно, але наша залізниця продовжує працювати.
Colonel Sarohi joins us once again. We're approaching the 4-year anniversary of this war. Many of people who thought that Russia would have encroached far further onto Ukrainian land right now. But of course, Ukraine still claims that infrastructure is functioning despite the sustained attacks by Russia. Does this represent a strategic failure for Moscow?
Well, Thomas, if we see that the war has been going for 4 years and Russians have been able to occupy the much territory, especially in the Donbass region. But you are absolutely right that if you see the strength of the Russian forces and the military establishment of the Russians, it is quite unsatisfactory progress which have been made by the Russians. Because for 4 years they have been fighting, and initially when they started off, they thought that this military operation, which they call, they will be able to achieve their objective in very short time. But in the last 4 years, although they have been advancing, but they are advancing at very slow speed. And they have totally devastated Ukraine. And I think we must give credit to Ukrainian people and the organization which are functioning there still after 4 years of war, that in spite of so much of destruction and devastation caused by the Russian drones and missiles, they are still able to function. And the credit goes to their railways also, who are trying to make sure that their logistics are being covered even after being attacked by the Russians so many number of times. Thomas.
Colonel Sirohi, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us and giving us your 2 cents on these issues. Pleasure to have you on the programme. We now turn to some news from the tech world, and a study has found that artificial intelligence tools are more likely to give incorrect medical advice when false information comes from sources they consider authoritative, according to a new study published in the Lancet Digital Health. Researchers tested 20 leading AI models, and they found that they were more easily misled by errors planted in realistic-looking hospital discharge notes than by health myths from social media. Overall, the AI systems accepted fabricated information about 32% of the time, but that figure rose to nearly 47% when the misinformation appeared to come from a healthcare provider. The study also found that authoritative tone in prompts made AI more likely to accept false claims. Researchers warn that stronger safeguards are needed before AI tools are widely used in medical care. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious material. The verdict ends Hong Kong's largest national security case and fuels global concern over Beijing's curbs on the city's freedoms. China says the sentence for Jimmy Lai is legitimate and lawful, insisting the case upholds the rule of law. The European Union, the UN and press freedom groups condemn the ruling, calling for Lai's immediate release and warning it undermines press freedom in Hong Kong. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's communications director Tim Allen resigns amid turmoil in his top team. The exit follows the Chief of Staff's quit after controversy surrounding a UK ambassadorial appointment. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, calls on Iranians to show resolve ahead of the anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. He says national strength lies in the will of the people, urging unity against foreign pressure. The Prince and Princess of Wales say they are deeply concerned by newly released documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Kensington Palace says their focus remains on the victims as renewed scrutiny falls on figures tied to the late financier. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi says the country will steadfastly protect its territorial waters and airspace. Speaking after a landslide election win, she pledges to strengthen defences and stresses self-reliance on national security. Russian drones and missiles strike cities across Ukraine, killing at least 4 people, according to regional officials. Ukraine says it shoots down over 100 drones amid ongoing war and parallel diplomatic talks. Human Rights Watch says an apparent Nigerian military drone strike kills at least 17 civilians in western Niger. The group says at least 13 others are injured when the strike hits a crowded market near Burkina Faso. We start our hour in the UK, and the government has officially expanded the British National Overseas Visa Scheme, a move prompted by the continuing deterioration of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong and the specific 20-year prison sentencing of pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai. Adult children of BNO status holders who were born between July the 1st, 1979 and June the 30th of 1977, under 18 at the time of the handover, can now apply for the visa independently of their parents. The update resolves an unfair discrepancy that previously allowed some younger children to resettle with their families, while older siblings were excluded due to the age at the time of the 1977 handover. Since the original scheme launched in 2021, over 230,000 visas have been granted, with nearly 170,000 individuals already having moved to the United Kingdom. We now are going to move on to our next story. During his diplomatic visit to Beijing in late January of this year, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had addressed the case of pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai, who is serving a 20-year sentence under Hong Kong's national security law. Starmer confirmed that he had raised Lai's case with Chinese President Xi Jinping alongside concerns about human rights violations, including China's treatment of Uyghurs. When questioned on the intensity of his approach, Starmer stated that he had raised the issues and highlighted the importance of maintaining a balanced dialogue with China. Lai, a British national since 1996, has become a symbol of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement, and Starmer's comments reflect the ongoing pressure on the UK government to address human rights concerns with China. This comes as Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison, a landmark case in Hong Kong. The city, of course, which is supposed to operate under the one nation, two systems rule until 2047. This ruling undermines that in a breakthrough for Hong Kong, the city, which, of course, now many actors, including the United Kingdom, see this law undermined. Jimmy Lai, a British national, has been sentenced for 20 years. Starmer, of course, has just visited China, balancing and walking that diplomatic tightrope, citing China as a national security threat, but of course still maintaining those trade ties with the country. Jimmy Lai, a huge name and a self-made billionaire who has now been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Joining us now is Shyam Batra. He's a British politician and political commentator. He joins us live from London. Shyam, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Of course, Keir Starmer, when he visited China, he said he raised Jimmy Lai as an issue. Lai, of course, a British citizen, has now been sentenced to 20 years in a landmark ruling under a Hong Kong court. Hong Kong, of course, supposed to be under this two systems, one country mandate, something that is now said to be undermined by this ruling. What is your thoughts on the UK's response to it now that Lai will be imprisoned in Hong Kong for 20 years?
Wow, it's a quite a bit interesting news today, isn't it? I mean, I've not seen something like this happen for quite a long time, but the take up on it it widens. What does it now do to the embassy? And after his event that Starmer went to China as well. I mean, this has just come out of the blue. It's a bolt out of the blue, isn't it? But I mean, the revelations, the international headlines have just been steaming out really about this situation But to Keir Starmer's comments on Jimmy Lai and new revelations about Prince Andrew, they're all going to come out. This, I assume, is all coming out from most probably the Epstein files. I'm not quite sure at the moment.
And of course, this is a landmark ruling, Shyam. Hong Kong handed over by Britain to China a few years ago now. Press freedom under debate, but does this solidify that Hong Kong now doesn't adhere to that one country, two systems rule that it is supposed to follow until 2047? What does it say about press freedoms in Hong Kong?
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure about how Hong Kong operates in its press freedom. We certainly know what happens here in the UK. That we can't really say as much as we want to say. But I assume with what's going on right now, I mean, I've just been reading also just before you came on about the UK is now expanding the Hong Kong visa scheme amid right concerns as well. So I don't think the government is playing too much heavy-handed on the situation on Jimmy, what's happened. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, this is how the cards are being played out. I mean, we've still got lots of revelations coming out from the Epstein files, which just doesn't cover the UK. It covers a whole heap of places all around the world, including, I believe that a lot of people in Hong Kong have also been summoned to speak about the Epstein stuff. But going on to our country and the UK, I mean, we are expanding our visa scheme with them now. So I assume that the Hong Kong people, the government is deteriorating their civil rights in terms of political rights in freedom of speech. We have the new Chinese New Year coming in, which I thought things would have created more of an ambience. But you've got to remember now that China runs Hong Kong, not Britain.
Indeed. It's an interesting development. Shyam, do stay with us as we turn on to another scandal topping the headlines in the United Kingdom. And Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew and the younger brother of King Charles, has shared official British trade documents with Jeffrey Epstein in 2010, leaking information to the late sex offender from his role as a government envoy through emails. Andrew has faced years of scrutiny over his friendship with Epstein, a relationship that has cost him his role in the royal family, titles and his home. He has always denied any wrongdoing and not responded to requests for comment since the latest release of Epstein files. In the latest batch of the files released in the United States, the emails have shown that Andrew has forwarded to Epstein reports about Vietnam, Singapore and other countries which he had been sent in relation to the trip he made in official capacity. We move on to a related development next, and King Charles has again faced heckling during a visit to Clitheroe train station in Lancashire over his brother Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's linked to Epstein. As the King greeted members of the public, one person shouted questions about how long he had known about Andrew's association, drawing boos from the crowd. The incident follows the latest release of the Epstein files by the US Department of Justice, which includes fresh allegations against Andrew. Meanwhile, Prince William and Kate say they are deeply concerned, while the palace has earlier stripped Andrew of his remaining royal titles. Shyam Batra joins us once again. Of course, the fallout does not stop for Andrew as these over 3 million batch of files continues to be sieved through. I want to focus on the King, Charles, and his lack of official commenting on this case. I don't have a doubt that it's going to come out at some point soon. But what does this current silence say about the situation?
Well, I want to also ask a question out to the public as well. I mean, the thing is this, that they've homed in on Andrew. Are you telling me that Andrew is the only person that knew Epstein and his wife, etc.? I'm pretty certain when Epstein was high up in the sky, that even the King knew about it. Even his families knew about it. I mean, you can't just hide one guy. Andrew has really destroyed our royal family, I can say quite easily. The repercussions, and then to lie on top of it, oh, I wasn't with him, I wasn't with any girls and all that stuff. You know, sometimes in life you've got to do what I call transparency, not secrecy. And in our country, out of all the countries and other countries in the world, all they have is secrecy, not transparency. Who are the people that suffer? Our communities, our public get to know last. I mean, with the sensitive UK trade reports of Jeffrey Epstein, I think I was on one of your shows where I believe that even he was told by Andrew that and others that there's going to be a bailout in the European Union, and information had passed hands at that time. Now, the thing is that Andrew was in a very strong position with, he was also, I believe, if I'm not wrong, and Jeffrey Epstein was also a UK trade envoy in 2010. So he had made very good friendships with Andrew, and that also went as far as Hong Kong, Singapore, and Vietnam. So the emails that have been released recently show that Andrews sent internal trip documents to Epstein shortly after receiving them. I mean, that had in itself triggered scrutiny from police, which raised fresh concerns about the misuse of official access. So whilst Prince William and Princess Kate are expressly deeply concerned, why are they only saying that now that they're deeply concerned? They've known about Epstein and Andrew's involvement in it. Why are they suddenly out of the blue saying, oh, we are deeply concerned? There's a lot more hidden here.
Shaheen Batra, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you here on the programme. We now move from the United Kingdom and over to the Middle East, and Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, called on the people of Iran to share a strong message ahead of the 1979 Islamic Revolution anniversary. He reminded them that foreign powers, especially the United States, have always tried to bring back the old monarchy under Shah Reza Pahlavi. Khamenei explained that real strength doesn't come from military weapons like missiles or aircraft, but from the will and determination of the people. He encouraged citizens to show their unity and resilience once again against any foreign efforts which tries to weaken Iran's independence. Let's listen in to what the Supreme Leader said.
قدرت ملی بیش از اون که به موشک و هواپیما ارتباط داشته باشه به اراده ملت‌ها و ایستادگی ملت‌ها ارتباط پیدا میکنه. شما به حمدالله ایستادگی رو نشان دادید و اراده خودتون رو نشان دادید در قضایای مختلف. باز هم نشان بدید، دشمن رو مایوس کنید. تا دشمن مایوس نشه در معرض آزار و اذیت قرار میگیرن یک ملت. باید دشمن رو مایوس کرد. مایوس بودن دشمن با اتحاد شماست، با قدرت فکر و اراده شماست، با انگیزه شماست، با ایستادگی در مقابل وسوسه‌های دشمن.
Mohammed Osman joins us now, a Middle East expert, joining us live from Cairo to discuss this further. Thank you so much for joining us. The anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution is coming up. Of course, over 30 years ago now, this of course happened. What does that signalling and communication say about what the Supreme Leader knows about his audience? What kind of effect is it going to have? Is there still a sense of pride in Iran when it comes to that, especially, of course, after this brutal crackdown on the protesters that has happened inside the country?
Thank you for having me, Thomas. Always a pleasure to be with you. So, of course, Iran now is preparing to celebrate its 46th or 47th anniversary of the revolution. So that's quite a long time. I'm not sure if it's 46 or 47. However, that's been over 4 decades now, nearly 5 decades, that the Islamic regime has been in power since the revolution of 1979. And of course, the Iran of 1979 and the Iran of 2026 are galaxies apart, Thomas, because the temperament back then, the general atmosphere, what the people were aspiring for, And the general mood in the street back in 1979 was that people wanted to overthrow the despotic Shah, despotic monarchy, and thousands of years of monarchic tradition. And eventually they embraced Ayatollah Khomeini back then as the leader of Iran, who would establish a new system of governance that will deliver on injustice in their own version of freedoms and on many other fronts. 46 years later, the regime didn't really deliver on most of these fronts and has been running basically a project of regional hegemony with a very sectarian religious dimension into it or component in it, which basically has been a destabilizing factor in the region. So the people today are basically alienated and disenfranchised with what the regime has to offer. They do not really agree with the regime's foreign policy directions, and they do despise the idea that they have to suffer economically and domestically so that Iran can pursue, or the government can pursue, its adventures abroad. And this was one of the main drivers behind the latest wave of protests that were, of course, brutally put down. Not the first time that the Iranian government resorts to brute force to suppress demonstrations. However, this time was the most brutal of them all. At least 5,000 people died. Iran admits 3,000. Independent sources say 5,000 protesters died. Some sources indicate that it might be in the tens of thousands. However, those have never been verified. So Iran of 1979 is very different from the Iran that is preparing to celebrate, arguably to celebrate the 46th or 47th anniversary of the revolution. The regime will certainly celebrate. Its supporters, who are in the millions, will certainly celebrate. However, the Iranian people at large, 92 million people, I don't think this will happen.
The Ayatollah there speaking about foreign powers, especially the United States. According to him, vying to bring back the old monarchy. We saw Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's son, be a kind of, not icon, but rallying the people during those protests when they were happening. How much appetite is there in Iran to bring back that old system, and of course the presence of foreign actors, the likes of individuals who work for Israel and the United States? What's their presence inside the country like?
The supreme leader is right. This is not conspiracy theory talk. The United States and Israel do have a vested interest in toppling the regime in Iran. At least Israel does. The United States wants to subdue the regime and bend it to its will, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't mind removing it. And they are scheming through intelligence, through infiltration over years, not only in the latest round of unrest, to destabilize the regime in Iran and topple it, and now it's even threatened with an act of military aggression. So this is true, and of course the Supreme Guide is using this international atmosphere of tension surrounding Iran in order to justify the government's iron grip and to rally the people around the flag. Basically, and also on the other hand, this idea of the crown prince coming back, and I don't think anyone really wants him to come back. I don't think the Iranians really want to replace the regime of the Ayatollahs with an Iranian Shah 2.0. I don't think that they want that. He has no grounds in the country. There are supporters of monarchy restoration. However, those are in a minority. I don't think they are beyond 10 to 15% of the population, according to experts I've spoken to, who are inside Iran. So I think that the idea that he's an icon or that he's a rallying symbol for the opposition is quite farcical, Thomas.
Mohammed, do stay with us. Of course, we'll continue to cover that ongoing situation inside Iran. As soon as we get those updates, we'll bring them straight to you. But we have some incoming news coming out of the United Kingdom once again. And in a New detail emerging from Downing Street. The UK Prime Minister's official spokesperson has said that Keir Starmer will not be resigning from his post and will be focusing on his job instead. The spokesperson has said that Starmer's mood was upbeat and he was confident in his role in navigating the ongoing political crisis due to Peter Mandelson's scandal. We'll bring you the updates coming out of that as well. We move on, and more from Middle East diplomacy. And the European Union, in a statement, has expressed its concern about the consequences of the Israeli military operation against armed groups in the refugee camps of the northern West Bank. The statement reads that the operation, ongoing for 40 days, has resulted in scores of casualties, the displacement of some 40,000 Palestinians from their homes, and the destruction of vital civilian infrastructure. The EU has also called on Israel, in addressing its security concerns in the occupied West Bank, to comply with its obligations under international humanitarian law by ensuring the protection of all civilians in military operations and allow the safe return of displaced persons to their homes. Further, in the statement, the EU said that extremist settler violence continues throughout the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and has urged Israel, as the occupying power, to protect civilians and to hold perpetrators accountable. The EU has also expressed concern over the increased number of checkpoints and tighter movement restrictions across the West Bank. The EU emphasised its commitment to the security of Israel and condemned all terrorist attacks or attempted terrorist attacks against Israel or Israeli citizens. A statement there coming out from the European Union in terms of Israel's actions inside the West Bank. Mohammed Osman joins us once again. We've heard this before. Your analysis on how the European tackles such issues in terms of both the West Bank, Gaza, of course balancing the tightrope when it comes to condemning, some would say, clearly illegal actions in occupied territories, to maintaining that that stance of wanting to keep relations friendly and strategically connected to the Israeli state. How is Israel going to respond to this, or is it going to respond to this?
Israel, of course, has been acting with impunity in the occupied Palestinian territories. It has been launching a war of genocide in Gaza for over 2 years now. Gaza is theoretically in a state of ceasefire where there's a cessation of hostilities. However, the killing still goes on a daily basis, and the destructions and the incursions and the further acquisition of the land as Israel expands its zones into Gaza. The same applies in the West Bank, where a much more subtle campaign of displacement and relocation of the civilians and ravaging and devastation of urban spaces where civilians live in the West Bank, with the goal of depopulating certain parts in order to pave the way for further settler expansion at this point. And as you might very well know, Thomas, this is not something new. This has been going on for years. The Europeans, of course, basically are doing a balancing act, rhetoric without any substance, without any actual measures that should be taken to deal with such impunity and such irresponsible criminal behavior by the Israeli occupation. And the Israelis will respond as well with rhetoric. Netanyahu and the government will condemn the EU statement and tell them, you don't know what you're talking about, you're supporting terrorism, blah, blah, blah. However, at the end of the day, the Europeans, even though a genocide took place in Gaza and over 70,000 people were murdered, most of them civilians, they did not impose sanctions on Israel. They did not sever economic relations, and I do not expect them to do so over the West Bank.
Mohammed Osman, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. We move on now, and 53 migrants, including 2 babies, are dead or missing after a large rubber dinghy capsized off the coast of Libya. According to the International Organization for Migration, the boat began taking on water 6 hours after setting off from Ziwaya, a town in eastern Libya. The passengers, mostly migrants and refugees from several African countries, were attempting to cross to Europe. Libyan authorities rescued 2 Nigerian women, one of whom lost her husband and the other lost both her babies in the wreck. The IOM stated that many boats leave Libya heading for Italy, specifically the island of Lampedusa, though the open dinghies used for such journeys are unsuitable and unsafe. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer the US House Oversight Committee invoking the Fifth Amendment, lawmakers have said. Both parties criticised the move as Democrats allege she seeks clemency and her lawyer says she'll testify only with a pardon. King Charles III says he will support police if asked over claims Prince Andrew shared sensitive material with Jeffrey Epstein. Buckingham Palace says the King is concerned by newly reviewed Epstein files. The United States and Armenia have agreed to cooperate on civil nuclear energy, deepening ties. The move follows a US-brokered South Caucasus peace deal, with Washington seeking to draw Yerevan closer. The United States has issued new guidelines urging US-flagged ships to avoid Iran's waters in the Strait of Hormuz amid rising tensions. The advisory also warns against Iranian forces boarding American vessels. The White House opposes Israel annexing the West Bank, saying stability is vital to regional security. It stopped short of condemning new measures or saying if concerns were raised with Israel's government. Venezuela's parliament has delayed a vote on a proposed amnesty law, moving the session to Thursday. The move comes amid US pressure to free political prisoners following Maduro's ouster. Police arrested 27 people as clashes erupted while officers cleared protests ahead of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit in Sydney. Protesters allege pepper spray misuse as PM Anthony Albanese urged calm ahead of a new rally. Mexican authorities recover 10 bodies during the search for workers kidnapped from a Canadian-owned mine in Sinaloa State. Officials say 5 victims were identified so far, while forensic teams work to confirm the others. We start this hour in the United Kingdom. King Charles has made his first public intervention in the ongoing Epstein scandal, expressing concern over allegations against his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. A Buckingham Palace spokesman stated that the King, while acknowledging the seriousness of the claims, has offered support to Thames Valley Police as they assess potential investigations. The police are considering a complaint from the anti-monarchy group Republic, which reported Andrew for suspected misconduct and breach of official secrets. The palace emphasised that the King and Queen's thoughts remain with the victims of abuse. Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Himanshi Singh, a Defence and International Relations Analyst, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, first of all. The public fallout is rife. There are ripples in government and the monarchy alike due to these files being released and the links that they showed to high members of the royal family and the members of government. This, however, is the first statement issued by the King after these newly released files, and he's saying that he's willing to cooperate with the police in the UK in order to aid them with any investigation in regards to his brother's connections with the disgraced financier. Does this move by the monarch signal transparency, or is it too late?
See, when a British monarch expresses profound concern, it is a serious statement, but concern is not accountability, Thomas. For survivors of abuse, concern does not bring closure, it's just the truth that comes out. So when this issue transcends to United Kingdom, it speaks of every system, where the institutions are reluctant to scrutinize their most powerful members. They are ready to cooperate because the anti-monarchy group is now very seriously reported, these concerns about the serious misconduct. But we learn that, institutions earn legitimacy through, not just through traditions, but through transparency. So how transparent they are going to be when the police goes to their doorsteps and carries out these investigations is justice has to be universal. It cannot be bending for titles whether they are royals, political or cooperate people, because the moment law pauses at privilege, democracy, and when people have some status like this, then justice is denied. So this is not an anti-monarchy argument. It is a pro-justice argument which Charles has given. If in case they are ready to willing, we already know that Epstein has visited even the Birmingham Palace and had some private meetings with Andrew when Queen Elizabeth was alive. So this raises serious concerns about the security also, and he was allowed to bring anybody whom he desired to. So somewhere, Prince Andrew has faltered a lot, and justice must remain credible and should not blind to the rank and file of truth. So in case the royal family, even, Prince William and Kate Middleton, they have also voiced their concern. But the concern will not do anything. We need some changes on the base level. Because, if you see the global implications, it actually erodes the moral leadership of such royal families, where inconsistent accountability weakens the leadership. Then these institutions are at risk, because public confidence in monarchies and democratic institutions depends on the equal application of law, which is not there. And when survivors of justice, they are put versus the elites. So many a times we see the justice fails to serve everyone equally. That is why we must understand there is a global lesson that no nation, no democracy, no monarchy can selectively argue on morality in the age of transparency. So if in case the royal families, they cooperate, we may see a lot of truth coming out. Thomas.
One of Andrew's most prominent accusers, Virginia Giuffre, made these significant public statements in 2019. Now, that's nearly 7 years ago. It's taken this release and this tranche of files to signal that the palace would be willing to cooperate with police. Of course, at that time, Queen Elizabeth was still alive. What does this say about how the royal institution has treated the severity of this situation?
See, nobody had treated this particular scandalous event of things very seriously unless it became into a hurricane. People knew about it. He was jailed earlier also, and after release from jail, he visits these elites. So somewhere, people were giving him lot of shelter. They were in gloves with him. And after so many years, 7-8 years of these things coming out, and the entire thing has actually become public very recently. So the entire furor is very recent. Before that, people were aware. See, we cannot just say that the royal families or the elite or the political centers were not aware. People in the helm of affairs were very much aware. It cannot happen that something so grossly wrong is happening in a state like USA, which boasts about its institutions, and people were not aware. So somewhere he was sheltered, and he was giving lot of things because of his privileges status. So I think expressing concern and saying, okay, fine, we'll cooperate is not the last thing. The concern must be followed by cooperation, transparency, and accountability. Otherwise, these statements will remain symbolic and not substantive. Thomas.
Do stay with us, Lieutenant Colonel Singh, as we turn over to our next story. And we head over to East Asia. And Hong Kong media tycoon and China critic Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years in prison, marking the conclusion of the city's largest national security case. Lai was convicted on charges of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and publishing seditious materials. Hong Kong leader John Lee has defended the sentence, stating that Lai deserved the punishment due to the harm he had caused. These remarks came a day after the sentence was handed down. Let's listen in to some of those remarks.
Jimmy Lai, who has betrayed the country and Hong Kong, has been sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, a heavy punishment that sends a solemn warning against malicious plots of collusion with external elements and endangering national security. He caused damage to the interests of the country and the Hong Kong SAR. His conviction is supported by overwhelming evidence, and he deserves the punishment after all the harm that he has done.
International reactions have been swift. The European Union has called the prosecution politically motivated and urged Hong Kong authorities to restore press freedom. Australia has also expressed grave concerns over the deteriorating situation of press freedom in Hong Kong, while Britain has decried the sentence as tantamount to a life sentence, calling for Lai's release on humanitarian grounds. Lieutenant Colonel Singh joins us once again on this story. Of course, this has been a huge story. Lai, who is a British citizen and the founder of now shut pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison in a system of Hong Kong which is supposed to operate on the one country, two systems rules until 2047. Western governments, of course, seeing this as proof that Hong Kong's promised freedoms are effectively dead, and China, of course, saying that Jimmy Lai's conviction is the rule of law. Do you think Western governments are correct in issuing these statements?
Of course, they are correct, because when Jimmy Lai gets legally prosecuted, he is being politically targeted. So this overlap defines political imprisonment. See, it is very clear the proportionate evidence of violence or direct threat. It's not an ideological disagreement. We see that on paper, yes, China is saying, okay, fine, they're not interfering, but this kind of prosecution definitely shows that they are prosecuting. And it is a final closing book of the Hong Kong's identity as a bridge between East and the West. By, labeling a media mogul as a national security threat, China is prioritizing domestic control over the international reputation. So it has long-term implications. It ends Hong Kong as a global hub because Hong Kong succeeded because of the rule of law. This sentencing signals that global investors and multinational corporations will accelerate exit to Singapore or Tokyo, fearing that leadership can target them like Jimmy Lai. And if the crosses, if they try to be more expressive and cross that political line. So somewhere I think China is giving a very chilling blueprint to the nations when, it is demonstrating that you can absorb a global financial center and strip its freedom to express. So I think it's a very, very serious concern which the Western democracy is expressing.
Lieutenant Colonel Singh, thank you so much for taking the time in speaking to us here on the programme. We now turn over to the US, and Vice President James David Vance has said that Armenia and the United States have signed an agreement to develop cooperation in the civilian nuclear sector. Vance added that the deal includes $5 billion in initial US exports and an additional $4 billion in fuel supply and maintenance. Let's listen in to what the Vice President had to say.
Very proud to announce that our nations have completed negotiations on a 1-2-3 civil nuclear cooperation agreement. Now, once that is completely stood up, it'll pave the way for American and Armenian companies to strike deals on civil nuclear projects. That means up to $5 billion in initial U.S. exports, plus an additional $4 billion in long-term support through fuel and maintenance contracts. I also was very happy with the Prime Minister just a couple of minutes ago to see some of the new drone technology that we will be selling to Armenia. As President Trump knows very well, the very best way to ensure that you have peace is to establish real deterrence. And the best way to establish real deterrence is with the best military technology in the world, and the United States has that.
Professor Veselin Popovsky joins us now, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Is this deal a strategic signal to Russia or a limited tactical partnership with Armenia, of course, following that peace deal signed earlier in 2025?
Well, definitely. It's a very good news. By the way, Armenia relied on Russia, and before that was part of the Soviet Union for the last century. So obviously this is a signal that Russia can no longer protect any neighbor, and not only Armenia, it applies to every other neighbor. Nobody in the world, Venezuela felt the same, can be protected by Russia. Russia cannot protect itself anymore. It's a failed state. And obviously it's a good news because United States offer protection to Armenia, and it should do the same for Ukraine, by the way. The same deal I expect Donald Trump, J.D. Vance to offer to Ukraine, to give Ukraine and every Russian neighbor the same support, the same protection. That's the only way forward here. Yes, excellent news. I welcome it.
So you don't think this could cause any counter moves from either Moscow or even Ankara?
Well, from Moscow, not much, because Moscow doesn't have much options. Well, they can talk, they can protest. There will be a statement by Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we hear this every day. And they are useless statements. Nobody pay attention to Lavrov and Moscow anymore. Turkey is more interesting because it's a neighbor, and it's obviously will react to that in the sense of was Turkey informed about this deal? They may raise some concerns, but this could be actually easily dealt with on diplomatic level between Turkey and United States. I don't expect much tension. Ideally, Turkey should have been informed in advance. And if not, it's a mistake by the United States. They have to take into account that neighbors need to know those deals.
And how does this deal Armenia's security calculus vis-a-vis Azerbaijan?
Currently, there is a peace, as we know, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is no tension after they signed the two states last year, after a long year of conflict. It's one of the good news of 2025. By the way, Donald Trump doesn't have much to do with that. That was negotiated bilaterally between the two countries, mostly. Well, they invited Donald Trump as a guest to be present, but the deal was nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was done between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I don't think, again, much tension will arise. Hopefully, the two countries will coexist and cooperate as neighbors from now on. If Azerbaijan needs some help in terms of its security, obviously it's also another partner. I'm sure United States and other countries will not refuse any support for Azerbaijan, but mostly Armenia is the one that needs. Armenia is a poorer country of the two. Azerbaijan has its own resources. It's a pretty much well-capacitated state to take of its own security. So in this case, Armenia is the one that needs foreign assistance.
What more can you tell us about Armenia as a country? Its strategic importance, its resource wealth. Why has the US moved like this?
US would like to be involved in peace deals, mostly after the conflict ended. And Armenia needs support because, yes, it's a mountainous country. Its GDP is pretty low per capita. It doesn't have the necessary exploration. It has, you are right, they have resources, but they need more exploration and more international assistance, I will put it generally. And certainly security is important, but also economic infrastructure is there. And that possibly also explain why United States offered that assistance. We know this administration is very materialistic. They are looking for material outcome of that. And one could be that, I would not be surprised, let's put it this way, that further deals for Armenian exploration of their resources follows, again, with United States involvement and contribution to that.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us as we turn over to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine for our next story. And Russia has claimed strikes on Ukrainian military targets, while Ukraine reported intercepting multiple Russian drones. Russia's defense ministry says that over the past 24 hours, Russian troops had struck a Ukrainian military airfield's infrastructure, along with energy and transportation facilities, as well as temporary deployment points of the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has praised the resilience of emergency responders and railway workers as they continue to maintain critical infrastructure despite daily Russian attacks. In his regular video address, Zelensky highlighted the tireless efforts of Ukraine's state emergency service in restoring energy facilities and extinguishing fires. He also acknowledged the continued operation of Ukraine's railways despite ongoing strikes targeting logistics and railway-related facilities. Zelensky called for intensified efforts in February to strengthen Ukraine's position in the war, including improved access to Starlink systems and reliable delivery of military equipment. Let's listen in to what the Ukrainian president has said.
Дякую за реальну ефективність рятувальникам ДСНС України, які щодня працюють на об'єктах енергетики, на гасінні пожеж. Щодня допомагають людям та громадам пройти цей складний час. Результати кожного, хто задіяний зараз в ліквідації наслідків ударів, у відновленні – це робота на всю Україну, на силу нашої держави, на здатність українців вистояти і цією зимою. Та загалом хочу теж відзначити Укрзалізницю, усіх фахівців Укрзалізниці. Надзвичайно складно. Зараз фактично щодня російські удари по нашій логістиці, по об'єктах, які працюють на залізницю, по рухомому складу. На багатьох напрямках небезпечно, але наша залізниця продовжує працювати.
Professor Popovsky joins us once again. Ukraine says Russia's attacks on critical infrastructure daily keeps even through this, Ukraine's rail routes remain operational, while of course counteracting claims from Moscow saying that it's struck these key Ukrainian military targets. What does Ukraine's ability to keep railway networks going say about its wartime resilience?
Well, certainly it's very clear what Ukraine is doing. They are defending its territory, they are defending its infrastructure, they are saving human lives by operating in emergency with those aggressive strikes and inhuman strikes by Russia. I see resilience, I see commitment, and it's every day when President Zelensky says that even reassures all of us that Ukraine will survive the winter. The Russian strategy will fail. Ukraine will not freeze this winter. I speak daily with my friends in Ukraine, and all of them are pretty optimistic. They say the winter will be over in a few weeks. We have private generators for extra electricity. We are not dying. We haven't heard anybody dying from freezing, by the way, over the last 2 months. So everything Russia is trying to do is to cut electricity, cut the heating, but that doesn't lead anywhere. A resilient nation like Ukraine will survive the winter and will defeat Russia long term, obviously. This is the last attempt by Putin to inflict some damage, and it failed again. So it failed not only militarily, but even with the war crimes Putin commits against Ukraine, those don't produce anything. There are no freezing in Ukraine. People survive pretty solidly, and I'm pretty optimistic that in long term Ukraine will defend its territory, will liberate Donbass, and it will take time because of, we know why, because of Donald Trump continuous neutrality here and not helping Ukraine and supporting Putin effectively.
And what about the front line? What more do we know about it? We know about certain major battles currently unfolding, including that of Pokrovsk, a major flashpoint in the war currently. What more can you tell us about what's going on the Eastern Front?
Well, it's a stalemate. There is not much movement either way. Pokrovsk is still in the hands of Ukraine, as it's Kupiansk. So again, I mentioned the total failure of the Russian advance. They tried those two small cities, by the way, they are not big ones. Kupiansk and Pokrovsk are very minimal in comparing to Indian or Chinese cities. They are just with a population of 50,000 and maybe less left now. So Russia doesn't advance, and it advances so minimally that it doesn't make any difference really on the battlefield. Ukraine is defending very well, and Russia is losing a lot of soldiers. So that's the news from the battlefield. In January only, for those 31 days, the estimation is that Russia lost over 30,000. So it's more than 1,000 per day. So is Russia losing, attacking Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, and other small villages. So that's the news of the battlefield. Putin is ready to sacrifice 1,000 soldiers per day.
And if you don't, apologies. And if you don't mind, you're speaking to people in Ukraine now. You're saying they remain optimistic despite, of course, the ongoing winter, despite the war reaching its fourth year. It will be later on this month. What's the mindset of the people there currently?
Well, resilience, commitment. I speak to people in Kharkiv, which is only 40 kilometers from the battlefield. There are drones. They say sometimes, yes, we wake up in the morning and we see the debris from the drones falling down. There are some sirens. They have to evacuate when the situation gets worse, and they do that. They're used to that already. They're kind of joking with me now, and they say, yes, another winter, we can do another 5 winters, no problem. We will survive. We will get over this. It will take time. And they blame, obviously, Donald Trump for not helping Ukraine like Joe Biden did last time. But they are very optimistic. They say we have our spirit, our government. They're all behind the government. There is absolutely no doubt that they are supportive. 70%, the latest opinion polls show that they support the government, and they are expecting good news in 26.
Professor Popovsky, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us. Great pleasure to talk, as always. We now move on, and the US Labour Board is abandoning a years-long legal battle against Elon Musk's SpaceX, according to a Bloomberg News report. The National Labour Relations Board has dismissed a complaint accusing the aerospace company of firing 8 engineers over the involvement in a letter criticising Musk. In a letter to the former employee's attorney, the NLRB said it lacks jurisdiction over SpaceX, citing a recent opinion from the National Mediation Board, which oversees airline and railroad workers. As a result, the agency said it will not pursue the case. The move follows a US appeals court ruling that questioned the NLRB's legal structure and barred it from proceeding against SpaceX. The decision could limit future labour actions involving the company. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious material. The victim ends Hong Kong's largest national security case and fuels global concern over Beijing's curbs on the city's freedoms. Following this, China says the 20-year sentence for Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai is legitimate and lawful, insisting the case upholds the rule of law. The EU and press freedom groups condemn the ruling, calling for Lai's immediate release. The Prince and Princess of Wales say they are deeply concerned by newly released documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Kensington Palace says their focus remains on the victims as renewed scrutiny falls on figures tied to the late financier. Russian drones and missiles strike cities across Ukraine, killing at least 4 people, according to regional officials. Ukraine says it shoots down over 100 drones amid ongoing war and parallel diplomatic talks. Human Rights Watch says an apparent Nigerian military drone strike kills at least 17 civilians in western Niger. The group says at least 13 others are injured when the strike hits a crowded market near the Burkina Faso border. Thousands protest across Australia as Israeli President Isaac Herzog arrives on a multi-city visit. The trip follows a deadly Hanukkah shooting in Sydney and comes after an invitation from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Lebanon says 14 people are killed after residential buildings collapse in Tripoli as search and rescue operations end. Civil defense officials say 8 people are rescued from the rubble in the Bab al-Tabane neighborhood. Venezuelan authorities say they seek court approval to place opposition figure Juan Pablo Guanipa under house arrest after he is seized in Caracas. The move comes after his release from jail following 8 months in detention over alleged terrorism plot charges. We turn to Japan to start this hour, and the Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi expressed openness to dialogue with China following a period of heightened tensions. In a statement, she emphasized Japan's willingness to continue discussions with Beijing, citing ongoing exchanges of views between the two nations. Takaichi, who recently secured a resounding election victory, assured that Japan would handle its relations with China in a calm and appropriate manner. signalling a desire to ease the tensions that had arisen in November after the remarks on Taiwan. Despite the diplomatic friction, Takaichi's position remains firm on fostering a constructive relationship moving forward. To discuss this ongoing situation in Japan is Major General Gigi Davidi, a professor of international relations and strategic studies. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for taking the time. A resounding victory for Sanai Takaichi today. There are, of course, huge questions over how the Beijing issue will be tackled. Of course, she's seen as a major China hawk, much like the person who she is a protege of, Shinzo Abe. Now Takaichi has a resounding majority in Japanese parliament. How is she expected to handle that friction with Beijing going forward?
Well, Thomas, I think Prime Minister Takaichi's gamble of going for snap polls, barely 3 months into office, has paid off, and she has got absolute majority with 316 seats out of 465, and with an ally, that is the Innovation Party, which has 36 seats. So she has a very resounding majority, and that gives her space for maneuver to pursue her agenda. Now, her challenges are basically, one is to handle relationship with China, and rightly so. When she was in the office, one of the statement that in case Taiwan's security threatened, then Japanese willingly will get involved, or in other words, that Japanese security is definitely tied to the security of Taiwan. And that's right, because if you take the Western Pacific and you take the East Asia, well, Taiwan is a hinge in this whole geographic region. And in case Taiwan is threatened or there is a conflict with Thailand, with Taiwan, then willy-nilly, it will have impact on the not only Korean Peninsula but also Japan per se. But the point is that she has to handle these relations, because tension with China is not in the interest of Japan, because we all know that after all, China is the biggest trading partner of Japan, and concurrently the challenge of Takaichi is also the economy of Japan, because that is another challenge. So they both are interlinked. In case the tension with China is managed, then obviously she can focus on the economy, which is a second challenge. But point here is two issues are very important. First and foremost, there is defense pact with America, and America has certain degree of strategic ambiguity as far as Taiwan is concerned. So therefore, Taiwan issue is linked with the American and Japanese security. So that cannot be wished away. And the second point is how the tension is managed. That is a major challenge, because China is very, very aggressive and very sensitive to the Taiwan issue. And any indication that either Japan or America are trying to sort of kind of interference in the Taiwanese affair will be taken on very sternly with the communist leadership in China. So therefore, I think Prime Minister Takaichi will have to do very tightrope walking to ensure that they do not actually annoy or rub the Chinese on the wrong side. At the same time, they are able to also look after the security interest. Thomas.
Yes, General Davidi, do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. We head to Europe, and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expressed pessimism about the future of economic relations with the US. Despite Russia's openness to cooperation, Lavrov dismissed the potential for fruitful economic ties, citing Washington's pursuit of economic dominance. In an interview, Lavrov noted that the US government's policy, including its opposition to the BRICS bloc, hinder the prospects for improved relations. While Russian officials, including envoy Kirill Dmitriev, have hinted at the possibility of economic revival following a Ukraine peace agreement, Lavrov remains cautious. He added that the US was creating artificial obstacles to Russia's integration with BRICS nations. General Davidi joins us once again to discuss US-Russia relations. The big picture here, of course, is that things are still cold, but with warm spots, especially with this new US administration. Of course, we have military communication beginning again with direct talks between the United States and Russia, something that was non-existent under previous presidential administrations. However, we are seeing a situation where nuclear arms control has collapsed. And of course, the main issue being those sanctions and the Russia-Ukraine war. Do you think Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is correct here in citing that there is not much hope for the development of United States and Russian economic cooperation, given Donald Trump's stance on Moscow?
Thomas, that's right, because if you take the bigger picture, despite the fact that President Trump has gone out of the way to invite President Putin on one-on-one meeting in Alaska last year, and he has taken definite steps, but actually things are not working on the ground. There are 2-3 very important reasons. First and foremost, any peaceful peace initiative on Ukraine has not yielded results. And the war, when President Trump came to power second time, he said that he will stop the war within 24 hours. Now it is more than a year that President Trump has been in office, and there's no movement whatsoever on the peace agreement. Second, of course, are the policies of America, because one is, you can see how America has come very heavily on the Russian export oil, to the extent they have been also impounding the tankers, and they have also laid very heavy tariffs on all those countries which are buying Russian oil. And secondly, of course, President Trump is very vehemently opposed to the BRICS bloc per se, and it terms BRICS as an adversary or as a challenge to the American economy or the American policies per se. So therefore, when you put these things together, no likelihood of peace on Ukraine in any near future. America's heavy-handedness and very vehement approach to the Russian oil exports, and of course to the BRICS group per se, all these things put together, I think Lavrov is right, that there's no likelihood of any major change in the economic outlook between America and Russia. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now turn over to the British Isles, and Jeffrey Epstein scandal continues there, and it haunts the British royal family. The latest release of the files has again heightened the relationship between the King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and the convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. While most royal figures have stayed silent, Prince William and Kate have issued their first public statement expressing deep concern over the ongoing revelations and focusing their thoughts on the victims. Prince Edward also commented, emphasising the importance of remembering the victims as well. Meanwhile, King Charles, who removed Andrew's titles last year, has yet to publicly address the scandal. And Princesses Beatrice and Eugene, Andrew's children, have not yet commented despite their connection to Epstein in the files. This comes as, of course, in terms and for the British royal family, the Andrew problem just won't go away. We have seen the former prince being mentioned in the Epstein files hundreds of times, along with those controversial images that came out of the former prince crouched over that redacted woman, whose photos went viral. Andrew has been the stain in terms of the staple British controversy when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew, formerly prince, had his titles stripped last year, maintained contact with Epstein after his 2008 conviction. That has been proven with these files. And of course, he faces now two accusers, one being the late Virginia Giuffre, who took her own life last year and publicly accused Andrew of sexual contact with her when she was underage. It hasn't been quiet for the royal family in this scandal, particularly coming to Andrew, following that catastrophic BBC Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis in 2019 that destroyed his credibility. Much of the British and world public seemed to see through this, and Andrew has been scarce in public ever since. Joining us now is Gautam Mukherjee. He's a senior journalist. He joins us live from New Delhi. Gautam, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the Epstein files continues to shake world politics, and the United Kingdom, of course, no exception, and the royal family no exception either. Now we've seen these comments made by the Dutch and Duchess of Cambridge. What does that mean for the scandal? Do you think that the British royal family are doing a good job of taking responsibility, especially for William and Kate's uncle and his connections to the late financier?
It looks to me as if they are reluctant to do very much, and that is, quite sad, because Andrew does not look repentant, and nor does the royal family look like it's punishing him. So, the reports about, he'll have to open his door personally for the first time in his life because he's only going to be left with 3 royal servants in Norfolk. Now, this kind of thing is a little pathetic considering the rest of us, the common folk, have to take responsibility for their actions and are punished for them in case they are out of order, to the extent, particularly to the extent that Andrew is implicated in. So I don't know what they're up to. They're trying to get out of it by doing things in small degree in the hope that the public will accept it.
And of course, someone whose statement is absent as far as now is his brother, King Charles. He took away his titles last year. He's no longer a prince. He's had all his military honours stripped from him as well. What do you think the lack of statement from King Charles says about the way that the royal family is navigating things?
Well, I think they're trying to evade responsibility, and they're trying to prevent any real harm coming to Andrew either. He's not being punished at all. And King Charles is hoping that he will be absolved of criticism by doing what he has done, which is really rather cosmetic in nature. It's not enough. It's not enough. It does not seem like it's enough at all.
Gautam Mukherjee, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. We now move on and over to some breaking news coming out of the Middle East next. And Israeli authorities have informed the United States that they are prepared to carry out unilateral strikes on Iran if necessary. According to local Israeli media, Israeli Defense Ministry representatives shared this message with Pentagon officials last week. Israel has outlined its plans to strike Iran independently if Tehran crosses its red line on ballistic missiles. While Israel does not currently see immediate threats, it continues to monitor the situation closely. Officials also expressed concerns that any potential US action against Iran may be limited, which contradicts Israel's stance. Meanwhile, a new round of negotiations between Iran and the US took place in Muscat, Oman, focusing on Tehran's nuclear program. Saul Sadka joins us now. He's a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Saul, thank you very much for joining us. The Trump administration has been outspoken when it comes to seeing diplomacy first, negotiating with Iran, with, of course, that military threat still there, loaded up in the Persian Gulf. If Israel does interfere here, will it throw all that diplomatic progress that the United States has already said it favours out the window?
Well, we saw the same thing a few times already over the past year and a half, and we have to make a very strong distinction between what is being said and what is being done. And for example, so we read this report, and we don't know, is this the real facts, or has this been leaked specifically to give certain people a message that they might be able to put a piece of paper between the Americans and the Israelis, or perhaps they could play them off against each other. Most likely, this is all messaging. We've seen in the past is that when Israel attacked Iran, even though the USA pretended not to know about it, it was quite clear that they did. And the same thing happened, by the way, with Qatar. The evidence that the Americans were informed of the Israelis' intent to attack Hamas leaders in Qatar is almost incontrovertible. So I would take this with a grain of salt. The Israelis and the Americans are and have been in the past working together to play essentially diplomatic divide and rule games against various parts of the Iranian regime. And that's probably what's happening here again. Though Israel, of course, as we saw in June, certainly does have the ability pretty much do whatever it wants to the Iranians. Once the Iranians no longer have any air defense or any proxy deterrence from Hezbollah or Hamas, the Israelis are basically free to have their way with whatever they want to do in Iran.
The Israelis, of course, have not been silent about their wishes for the Americans to take direct military action in Iran. Of course, the Trump administration has been reluctant. What will this do to the Israeli-United States relationship if Israel is seen undermining those diplomatic efforts by the United States to negotiate its ballistic missiles, its nuclear program, and its support for regional proxies when it comes to negotiations to them? Do you think that Donald Trump will react well to a direct Israeli military action?
Well, like I said, my assumption is, and the evidence for this, that this is already a game, that the Americans and the Israelis, as they have been before, are completely in cahoots. And the messaging that's coming out from Israel and from America is all coordinated to present Iran with an impossible situation. Like, all its decisions at this point are bad ones. It has to make a very bad choice, and it has no way around it. So the Americans are giving the impression they might be willing to negotiate, and as they're willing to negotiate, they're building up an ever vaster array of defensive and offensive capabilities all around Iran.
Apologies for the interruption. Any idea what these red lines could be? When it turns Israel saying that it's outlined its plans to strike Iran independently if Tehran crosses its red line. What is that?
Well, that hasn't been publicly announced. I read through the reports, and it's not clear exactly what that is. My guess it might be something to do with the re-establishment of production lines that were destroyed by Israel in June, or perhaps it will be the development of more complex and advanced missiles that would be able to better evade the current state-of-the-art defensive apparatus that the Israelis and the Americans have. It could be something like that. Or it could simply be a number. It could be that the Israelis are making assumptions that the Iranians have, say, 1,000 missiles capable of reaching their territory. And they're quite happy with that situation because they know they can bat most of them away. But say they would be more reluctant if they knew the Iranians were trying to build 2,000 more. Or perhaps they are simply worried about the number of launchers, because if you recall, the main issue with these missiles is not how many they have in total, but how many they can fire off at once. Because the only real threat from non-nuclear ballistic missiles is the question of can they be fired off at such a rate as to overwhelm the defensives.
Okay,
and
so
currently we don't have enough launchers to do that.
Okay, so do stay with us as we turn over to a related development. We head over to Gaza, and Israel's defense forces has said that it has killed 4 suspected, what it calls militants, who claimed to attack its troops as the armed men emerged from a tunnel in southern Gaza, and calling the group's actions as blatant violations of the ceasefire. This comes after a US brokered truce entering its second phase last month, as the violence has continued in the Gaza Strip, with Israel and Hamas accusing each other of breaching the agreement. The IDF has also said that 4 armed terrorists exited an underground tunnel shaft and fired towards soldiers in the Rafah area in the southern Gaza Strip. Following identification, the troops eliminated the terrorists. Saul Sadka joins us once again. 4 more individuals killed in Gaza. What's the current grasp that Hamas still has on the enclave? This occurred near Rafah, of course, where that crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip has opened. What do you have to say about this recent escalation in violence? Of course, we've seen over 500 Palestinians killed post-ceasefire. So what more can you tell us about this particular incident?
Well, the details of the incident are unclear, but it just adds to a long line of similar incidents that have been happening since the ceasefire came into effect some 6 months ago. And I have no doubt that they will continue to happen because there is a certain portion of the Hamas authorities who don't like the ceasefire and would like to continue to fight. And they view that as a religious imperative. So nothing will overcome that religious imperative completely. And so the IDF will continue to have to sit around the Hamas-controlled portions of Gaza and gradually denude their abilities to attack. And that will continue to cost the lives of these Hamas terrorists and also occasionally IDF soldiers. But that is the world we live in. You have to constantly hold the line. And hopefully over a period of years, Hamas, as they run out of weapons, will gradually disappear.
Okay, Saul Sadka, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you on these issues. We turn now to Southeast Asia, and the Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul's Bam Jai Thai party won a clear victory in Thailand's general election, raising the prospect that a more stable coalition may now succeed in bringing an end to a period of prolonged political instability. Anutin set the stage for the snap election in mid-December during a border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, a move political analysts said appeared to be timed by the conservative leader to cash in on surging nationalism. With nearly 95% of polling stations reporting preliminary results released by the Election Commission showed the Bum Jai Thai party winning about 192 seats compared to 117 for the Progressive People's Party and 74 for the once dominant Pheu Thai party. Let's listen in to what the Thai residents had to say.
ก็ผมก็กะแล้วว่าเสียหนูมาเพราะว่าอย่างพูดถึงพรรคเพื่อไทยพรรคประชาชนผมไม่พูดถึงนะเอาแค่นี้ยังเด็กเกินไปเด็กมากเห็นหนีไปแล้วตกต่ำเขาก่อนผมเป็นคนเสื้อแดงนะผมนิยมทักษิณนะ30 บาทเนี่ยผมนิยมมากเลยปัจจุบันนี้ผมก็ยังใช้30 บาทอยู่รักษาทุกโรคเนี่ยมาตอนแล้วทำไมแกหนีเพื่ออะไรแกหนีไปแล้วทำไมแกไม่ยอมมารับโทษจบไปแล้วถ้าแกมานี่เอาลูกเอาหลานเอาทั้งตระกูลมาเป็นผมไม่เห็นด้วยผมไม่เลือกเดี๋ยวนี้ผมไม่เลือก
พี่ว่ายุ่งกับมาตรา112มากกว่าใช่ค่ะจะรุนแรงไปหน่อยเพราะเราก็คนไทยเหมือนกันเนาะไม่ว่าคุณจะอายุมากอายุน้อยแต่คือเราเกิดประเทศไทยค่ะเราควรจะรักบ้านเราแต่คุณมาคิดแบบแบ่งแยกกันมันไม่ใช่
We finish this hour with news from the tech world, and the European Commission has ordered Meta to allow rival AI chatbots on WhatsApp after finding the company violated EU competition rules. Meta's own chatbot currently has an advantage with a dedicated button in the app. While it allows customer service bots to use WhatsApp through the business API, it doesn't allow general purpose AI like ChatGPT to access the platform. Authorities say WhatsApp must be open for fair competition. expecting it to change, possibly with a system similar to the system once used on Windows. Meta may need to allow third-party chatbots to initiate conversation or use shortcuts. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates. Thank you.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for...
Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer the US House Oversight Committee, invoking the Fifth Amendment. Lawmakers say both parties criticised the move, as Democrats allege she seeks clemency and her lawyer says she'll testify only with a pardon. King Charles III says he will support police if asked over claims Prince Andrew shared sensitive material with Jeffrey Epstein. Buckingham Palace says the King is concerned by newly reviewed Epstein files. The United States and Armenia have agreed to cooperate on civil nuclear energy, deepening ties. The move follows a US-brokered South Caucasus peace deal, with Washington seeking to draw Yerevan closer. The United States has issued new guidelines urging US-flagged ships to avoid Iran's waters in the Strait of Hormuz, aimed at raising tensions. The advisory also warns against Iranian forces boarding American vessels. The White House opposes Israel annexing the West Bank, saying stability is vital to regional security. It stopped short of condemning new measures or saying if concerns were raised with Israel's government. Venezuela's parliament has delayed a vote on a proposed amnesty law, moving the session to Thursday. The move comes amid US pressure to free political prisoners following Maduro ouster. Police arrested 27 people as clashes erupted while officers cleared protests against Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit in Sydney. Protesters alleged pepper spray misuse as PM Anthony Albanese urged calm ahead of the new rally. Mexican authorities recovered 10 bodies during the search for workers kidnapped from a Canadian-owned mine in Sonora State. Officials say 5 victims are identified so far, while forensic teams work to confirm the others. And for your top story this hour, Britain's Prince William is meeting Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, kicking off a visit aimed at deepening economic cooperation, but overshadowed by his disgraced uncle Andrew's links to Jeffrey Epstein. It is William's first official trip to Saudi Arabia, and ahead of his arrival in Riyadh, Kensington Palace broke years of silence over Andrew's links to the late US convicted sex offender by saying William and his wife Catherine were deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. The short statement, which did not directly reference the ex-Prince Andrew, came as the monarchy faces renewed pressure over allegations stemming from the tarnished royal ties to Epstein. We are now being joined by Ambassador Suresh Goel, who's a former Indian diplomat, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How does the timing of Prince William's visit come amid renewed focus on the Epstein files affect its diplomatic impact?
Very difficult to say, really. I will just, because the fact is that Epstein scandal has actually pervaded practically the whole global international politics, with the kind of connections he made and the kind of inroads through whatever kind of network he had developed. It had actually crossed many countries and lots of top political leadership as well as constitutional leadership. Prince Andrew's case is very well known. It has been already agreed to. And the damage of what Prince Andrew is actually now also affecting the government in the UK, with Lord Mendelssohn's appointment as ambassador to Washington. Therefore, I'm sure Prince William's on the visit, he may have to answer, but more than likely, and this is just my hunch really, Saudi Arabia will not be talking about the issues in a kind of a sense of to impact on the relationship between the two countries, which is what basically Prince Williams will be doing as a constitutional authority belonging to the monarch's family. But they may just talk about the Epstein in a very informal manner across the table as a kind of a conversation without making it part of the formal agenda. And therefore, while Prince Williams will talk about it, will explain the kind of role that Prince had played and how it impacted on King Charles. Now, I don't think that it is really going to weigh so heavily in the minds of the two princes when they talk to each other.
And what strategic interests lie behind deepening UK-Saudi relations today beyond ceremonial symbolism?
I think a lot, really, because Saudi Arabia, with the role it is playing in the Middle East, and also in terms of the European security architecture, please do, if you recall that several meetings between the Ukraine and Russian Federation have taken place in Oman as a part in the Gulf area, and Saudi Arabia has very good connections with Oman. Saudi Arabia would be very interested in what is impacting the European security and also in terms of what is happening in the Middle East. They are very, Saudi Arabia and UAE conflict has grown actually in the even within Yemen, Houthis. So Saudi Arabia will have a deep interest in seeing what UK is thinking about the developments, both in terms of Ukraine and Europe, and also in terms of the whole global politics, the impact of Trump's tariff policies, impact of what Trump decisions are. Therefore, Saudi Arabia and UK will be talking about those global politics and impact on the energy security.
And people are saying this visit is shadowed by the Epstein files. Do you think the shadow of it can highlight broader challenges in separating personal reputations from state-level engagements?
My sense is that they will not allow the shadow of Epstein scandal to impact on the bilateral relations. It will be a passing shadow, there will be a conversation piece, etc., but it will not be serious part of agenda, because the relationship between Saudi Arabia and UK, given the present context of the European security and the energy security, will be far, far too important than to be affected by this.
And is the focus on the scandal distracting from substantive issues like security, trade, or regional cooperation that the visit aims to address?
No, I again say that I don't think it will seriously impact on the defense, the security relationship between the two countries. No.
And what are we expecting to see after this visit concludes?
That is something which is difficult to answer. I think this visit is going to lay the groundwork for further conversations. I don't expect that there will be immediate results, but it is preparing the background for further developments in terms of the bilateral relationship.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Suresh, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Political parties in Venezuela have called for the immediate release of opposition leader Juan Pablo Guaidó after he was rearrested just hours after being freed from prison on Sunday. Supporters say that his detention undermines recent political prisoner releases. Let's listen in.
No es posible que ellos hayan emitido una boleta de excarcelación que solamente decía 2 condiciones, pero ellos hoy están alegando otras cosas. Una vez más queda en evidencia que el régimen no tiene una voluntad política realmente de avanzar y de que logremos una democracia plena y lograr una libertad absoluta de todos los presos políticos, que hay que dejar claro que no han cometido ningún delito, solamente pensar.
Meanwhile, relatives and activists have expressed deep disappointment after talks in the National Venezuelan Assembly to approve further amnesty for political prisoners were postponed. The delay has dashed hopes that hundreds more could be freed, leaving families frustrated and mistrustful of official promises. Let's listen in to some of their reactions.
Y hoy enterarme que las pospusieron, las suspendieron, no sé, ya me siento muy mal. Es una burla para los sentimientos de las personas que estamos acá, los familiares, la espera tan larga. Me siento muy decepcionada, la verdad.
Todo el mundo habla de la ley de amnistía y ayer hubo excarcelaciones sin que la ley esté aprobada. Es decir, que no hace falta la ley para hacer excarcelaciones de gente inocente.
Moreover, in a related development, freed political prisoners marched in protest shortly after their release in Caracas, calling for the complete and unconditional liberation of all detained opposition figures. Let's listen in to one such human rights activist who had been detained since his arrest in December 2024.
Creo que tengo una expectativa muy alta de cómo los venezolanos han perdido el miedo y cómo lo van a seguir perdiendo, porque ahorita necesitamos más que nunca desobedecer a quienes están en el poder, necesitamos más que nunca organizarnos y avanzar para poder arrancarles el poder y tener una elección una dirección general que nos lleve a tener autoridades que genuinamente representen la soberanía popular.
We are now being joined by Ambassador Vishwanathan, who's a former ambassador to Venezuela. Thank you so much for joining us here today. What does the rearrest of the opposition leader shortly after his release say about the government's commitment to political reform and reconciliation?
The Venezuelan government would do this release and manage the transition process gradually with full control. Okay, they wouldn't like suddenly to open up everything and have a serious problem of serious protests and agitations at the moment. You remember even what Trump says. He says first stabilization, then recovery, and then only transition. So they're also following the same path as Trump says.
And how might the postponement of the amnesty talks affect trust between Venezuela's ruling authorities and the opposition, as well as public confidence in the possibility of genuine change?
Of course, there is absolutely no trust between the opposition and the government. The opposition believes in Trump, and they don't give space for the government and accommodate them and compromise with them and reach a mutually agreeable settlement. They are using Trump to show his guns at their head and try and get concessions. This is not a viable or sustainable formula for transition or to democracy. Eventually, the opposition and the government have to work together and do a deal directly between themselves. It is wrong on the part of the opposition to use Trump at every opportunity to bully and intimidate the government. And the government would, of course, react and manage in a way to control this.
What prompted the rearrest of Juan Pablo, and how does this affect the opposition strategy moving forward?
Apparently, he had violated the conditions of release by making some public statement or something which the government did not like. Anyway, this kind of thing, push and pull, will go on. And it's not going to open up suddenly and become a free and open society tomorrow. No, it will take another at least 3 years.
And can the growing protests in Venezuela bring about any change in the government's stance on opposition leaders and political freedom?
No, absolutely no. The opposition had been protesting for over a decade. The regime is very well entrenched and strong, and a lot of people have emigrated, and the other people, they have fear, so they have used up all their energy in so many protests in the past. And then the opposition had been misleading the people, saying that, the regime would go tomorrow. It has happened. So people are also tired and exhausted. So I don't think there would be any serious and dangerous protest to overthrow the regime internally or bring about a change. No, it's not going to happen.
And how effective can the proposed amnesty law be in addressing political grievances if opposition parties remain sceptical and key leaders are still targeted?
The Venezuelans are learning from Trump. You see what Trump does? Can anyone negotiate with him? Does anyone have trust with him? And he's still getting away with it. So they think that if he can get away with it in the open, large democracy in the United States, it's a piece of cake for them to do that.
And in a broader human rights context, how should international actors respond to mixed signals of prisoner releases and subsequent arrests when evaluating Venezuela's political trajectory?
The international community should advise the opposition leaders that it is an internal domestic issue. They have to sort it out with the regime instead of going to United States. That's what happened in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, where they had much more brutal dictatorships. There, they didn't go to America. In fact, America was supporting those dictatorships. So the people, they struggled, and then finally they negotiated and got a deal, and they gave amnesty to them. So in this case, the opposition, they are not talking about amnesty and a deal for the rulers, because they are, the American government has announced bounties, like the vice president has bounty of $25 million, and the chief of armed forces has $15 million. Still over $100 million of bounties are on the heads of these people. So why don't this opposition go to Americans and say that please remove these bounties and stop the sanction, then we will deal with this government and we will negotiate with them directly. That is the only way.
Thank you. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly.
Okay.
Havana streets are eerily quiet as emergency measures kicked in to conserve Cuba's fast dwindling fuel stocks under economic pressure from US President Donald Trump. The oil supply in a US stranglehold as the communist government has shuttered universities, reduced school hours and the work week, and slashed public transport as it limited fuel sales. Meanwhile, some locals have reacted. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
Las medidas, te podría decir sin palabras porque no nos remedian el problema. Quizás a algunos les resuelvan, pero no nos remedia el problema a el % mayor de los cubanos que tenemos que hacer trámites, que tenemos inclusive que ir a trabajar.
No puedo ahora mismo moverme. Tengo familia en la provincia, tengo viaje que hacer, todo está cancelado, no hay a dónde, no hay nada. Estás paralizado aquí. Y es más la impotencia por el qué va a pasar, la incertidumbre, que no la...
Las medidas lo que me generan es inseguridad respecto a qué va a pasar con mi semestre universitario, cómo va a ser la situación de evaluaciones semipresencialidad mediante la plataforma EBEA, va a funcionar de verdad. Hay muchos estudiantes que viven en pueblos un poco recógnitos que nunca tienen corriente, y si no tienen corriente no tienen conexión.
We are now being joined again by Ambassador Vishwanathan. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. How much of Cuba's fuel crisis is due to US pressure, and how much is due to Cuba's own economic problems?
Well, primarily it is the responsibility of the United States, which had imposed sanctions for the last 7 decades. And they had so many assassination attempts and conspiracies and invasions and dirty tricks by CIA. Cuba has survived all these. But now they have reached a stage where it's going to be very, very extremely difficult for them to survive the latest strangulation, because United States has found that the economic warfare could be deadlier than bombing the country or hitting with missiles. Now they have blockaded Cuba, and they do not allow oil supplies to Cuba, and they have threatened sanctions on anyone supplying directly or indirectly. Earlier, Venezuela was supplying, not only supplying oil, but they were giving it free and at subsidized rates. Mexico was supplying some at, again, subsidized rates. But now Mexico has halted its supply. There was a little bit from Russia and a little bit from Algeria, but insignificant. But in any case, those countries wouldn't like to risk US sanctions by supplying anything. So now Cuba is in a desperate situation. Their stocks will not last for more than 2 weeks. and their own production of oil is only about 40,000 barrels per day, but they need 70,000 barrels more. And so the economy is going to collapse, and it's going to be a serious, serious problem.
And we heard that the government have put on emergency measures of reducing the work week, reducing school hours, shutting universities. Are these measures helping people, or are they making daily life harder?
Of course, it's making daily life harder, and it's going to be much more hard in the coming days and weeks.
And do US sanctions hurt the Cuban government or mainly ordinary citizens?
It hurts the citizens, it hurts the government, it hurts the country, and it hurts the sentiments of the world, because the US sanctions are absolutely illegal. If they don't like Cuba, they can stop trading with them. Why do they make the whole world to stop business with Cuba? What authority? It is absolutely illegal, immoral, unethical.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Palestinian officials have condemned Israel's recent approval of measures that would deepen its control over the West Bank, including the expansion of settlements and transferring authority for building permits to Israeli authorities in Palestinian areas such as Hebron. Hebron Deputy Mayor Asma al-Sharbati warns that this move could marginalize Palestinian institutions in the West Bank and accelerate settlement expansions. Meanwhile, the governor of Hebron, Khaled Dudin, called for an international action, urging UNESCO to uphold its role in protecting Palestinian heritage, particularly the Ibrahim Mosque, which is registered as a World Heritage Site. Let's listen in to what the governor had to say.
لذلك مطلوب تحرك دولي، مطلوب منظمة اليونسكو التي سجلت الحرم الإبراهيمي والبلدة القديمة على لائحة التراث العالمي بأنها فلسطينية خالصة، أن يقوموا بدورهم. موقف العالم اليوم موقف خجول من إطلاق مصطلح إرهاب على المستوطنين الذين يقومون بكل الموبقات على أبناء شعبنا في كافة أنحاء الوطن.
Alphabet's self-driving unit Waymo says it has gone fully autonomous in Nashville, Tennessee, marking a major expansion as the robot taxi race intensifies in the United States. The move follows a September announcement by Waymo and Lyft to offer deliveryless cab rides in the city, making Nashville the first commercial deployment of Waymo vehicles on Lyft's network. Waymo remains the leader in the US autonomous vehicle market, with more than 2,500 driverless cars operating across cities including San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin, and Atlanta. Competition is growing, with Tesla making robot taxis a core priority as it shifts focus from electric vehicles. Last week, Waymo raised $16 billion in funding, valuing the company at $126 billion, highlighting strong investor confidence in autonomous technology. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
we would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. Iran says it is prepared to dilute highly enriched uranium if the United States lifts all sanctions, according to its atomic energy chief. The statement comes as talks with Washington resume, with no clarity on which sanctions would be removed. Downing Street says Prime Minister Keir Starmer will not resign and is focused on governing despite intense pressure over the Epstein scandal. The statement comes hours after his Chief of Staff and Communications Director quit over controversy. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious material. The verdict ends Hong Kong's largest national security case and fuels global concern over Beijing's curbs on the city's freedoms. China says the sentence for Jimmy Lai is legitimate and lawful, insisting the case upholds the rule of law. The European Union, the United Nations and press freedom groups condemn the ruling, calling for Lai's immediate release and warning it undermines press freedom in Hong Kong. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, calls on Iranians to show resolve ahead of the anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. He says national strength lies in the will of the people, urging unity against foreign pressure. The Prince and Princess of Wales say they are deeply concerned by newly released documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Kensington Palace says their focus remains on the victims as renewed scrutiny falls on figures tied to the late financier. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi says the country will steadfastly protect its territorial waters and airspace. Speaking after a landslide election win, she pledges to strengthen defences and stresses self-reliance in national security. The European Union condemns Israeli decisions to tighten control of the West Bank and pave the way for more settlements. EU officials say the measures are a step in the wrong direction and undermine the prospects for peace. Those are the headlines for the hour. We head to our top story, and in the 3.5 million pages of the newly released documents in the Epstein files, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been mentioned over 1,000 times. According to reports, the revelation by the US Department of Justice added momentum to the allegation that the late sex offender was a Russian spy. The documents showed multiple times that Epstein desperately wanted to meet Putin, and there were multiple occasions when Epstein expressed his desire to meet the Russian Supremo. However, there's no evidence that the two ever met. However, the Kremlin dismissed the claims of the late American sex offender being a Russian spy, and in a press conference, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, when asked about whether Epstein was a Russian agent, dismissed the claims, calling it a joke and a waste of time. Alison Mutler joins us now. She's the former Associated Press bureau chief. She joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you so much, Alison, for joining us. What this story does show is Jeffrey Epstein's intentions to connect and be influential in all spheres of the world. Of course, Moscow, far away from those mentioned directly in association with Epstein. But what does that say about the power, about the influence that the will of Epstein can be taken seriously, that he did want to meet the Russian president, and that it could in some way maybe have been made possible?
Well, I think without any shadow of a doubt that Jeffrey Epstein did want to meet Putin and made multiple efforts. From the material I read from the files, he tried all kinds of avenues through the former Israeli Prime Minister Barak, through Norwegian contacts. He tried to get to Putin through his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. So he did try repeatedly over the years, because Putin is incredibly powerful and has been at the forefront of international politics for many years. There's no clear evidence has emerged that Epstein and Putin did meet, but that doesn't mean that Epstein did not meet people within his inner circle. The other day I published a story which came from an independent Russian outlet that said that Epstein got a visa to visit Russia, or tried to, through veteran members of the FSB. Now, for your viewers, the FSB is like the successor to the KGB. So Epstein did have links. Whether he met Putin or not, that is unclear. But that doesn't mean that he didn't meet people or officials who were very high up in the Kremlin. But what Epstein wanted was to gain access to someone with massive power, and also with somebody who was very used